Okay, I'd like to take a moment to thank Amerisure for making our training possible this evening. And tonight we're going to go over the requirements and roles for volunteers and chaperones at Special Olympics Michigan events. We're going to talk about volunteers, unified partners, chaperones, the difference between regular volunteers and just walk-up volunteers, those requirements, bus drivers, medical volunteers, guests and family, cheerleaders, COVID requirements, and some housing. For Class A volunteers, or as you guys know, we have you you can fill out the Volunteer A form. In order to be registered a Class A volunteer, you must complete the following requirements. You must do the general session. Your general session only has to be done one time during your whole, as many years as you volunteer with SOMI, it's only a one-time requirement. Your protective behaviors online training, it also has a quiz. It gives you guidance on some different things, how to treat athletes, how to identify potential signs of abuse. It's for ages 18 and up, volunteers ages 18 and up, and you're required to complete the training and quiz every 3 years. It is an online training through Special Olympics International. You also need to complete the Volunteer A form. Class A volunteers ages 18 and up must submit their social security number and driver's license because we do run a background check. It is required for those ages 18 and up. The concussion training, the state of Michigan mandates that all coaches complete a concussion training every 3 years. There are 2 different online courses that you can use to become trained in this. SOMI recommends the National Federation of State High School Associations Concussion and Sports Training course, but there is also the course through the Center of Disease Control's their Heads Up Concussion and Youth Sports Training course. This is for coaches only. Volunteers, regular volunteers do not need to do the concussion training. Here's just some key points on what every volunteer should know about volunteering with Special Olympics. Obviously, we expect that athletes be treated at the competition with respect and dignity. We know it's hard, but hugging is not always appropriate. Please greet older athletes with a handshake and or verbal nice job. I get lots of fist pumps. Other congratulatory remarks. Always stand at least 10 meters behind the finish line so you do not impede on the finishing of a race. We know it's exciting to step across and cheer them on across the finish line, but we don't want to be in anybody's way. Special Olympics is a year-round program. It's not just those annual events. It's for adults and children. And the average age of a Special Olympics athlete in Michigan is 27. Please do not refer to Special Olympics athletes as kids. Call them athletes or Special Olympics athletes or participants. Special Olympics is also, it's for persons that have an intellectual disability. Some Special Olympics Michigan athletes do have physical disabilities as well, but the criterion for to participate is that intellectual disability. Special Olympics should be publicized as a serious sports program, which challenges those with an intellectual disability. You need only attend on Special Olympics event, one Special Olympics event, to know that these athletes are quite capable. Special Olympics Michigan operates statewide. There are also special events that are offered at most area, regional, and state events. They are recreational in nature and not competitive. And Special Olympics Michigan believes that everyone has a role to play in ensuring the safety of Special Olympics athletes. As a volunteer, you are a mandated reporter, meaning that you are required to report any suspected abuse or neglect within 24 hours. Role of a unified partner. They're individuals usually without ID on unified teams, sports. Exceptions can include athlete individuals with ID that choose to participate as a unified partner. A unified partner must complete the Volunteer A form and check the unified partner box at the top. At events, a unified partner is the competitive level. You do not have to be 18 years old, but again, if you are over 18, a background check will be run and documented in GMS. They can be a volunteer. Volunteer A, again, if 18 or older, that background check will be run. A unified partner can be a coach who is stepping into that role. They can act as a coach and a partner for the following sports: bowling, golf, and cycling. All other unified team sports must have a non-playing coach. It can be a chaperone. A chaperone must meet all the chaperone requirements, which are Volunteer A, protective behaviors, general orientation, and must be at least 18 years old. You cannot be both a unified partner and an athlete. You must choose one and stick with that decision. You can't go back and forth depending on the event or the games. If you are participating as an athlete, you must stick with that decision. You're not allowed to go back and forth. As far as chaperones, to be a chaperone for Special Olympics, you must have the following: an up-to-date Volunteer A form, which must renew every 3 years, have that up-to-date protective behaviors, again, that's a 3-year course, and have your general orientation completed, again, just one time. With chaperones, we must meet the 4-to-1 athlete to chaperone ratio for every event. Coaches and assistant coaches can be counted as chaperones in that ratio. Unified partners can be chaperones as well, as long as they are over the age of 18 and they complete all of the chaperone requirements. We do have walk-on volunteers that show up to assist during different events. For a walk-on volunteer, they are unregistered, so they have not completed all of the regular volunteer requirements, but we do have them sign in at registration or / the volunteer check-in, and there are no pre-event requirements, but we do add them to our records after each event. And if someone acts as a walk-up volunteer and they decide that they enjoyed it or they want to be more invested in it, they're more interested in learning more, we can get them with the local area, and they would need to then complete the requirements based on the role. As far as bus drivers go, with bus drivers, it's a little bit different. When you would need to add them to your registration or housing, when you are going to be counting them, it's if a driver will be there needing meals, if they're going to be at the events, needing meals for the multiple days, if it's more than one day. If the driver will be needing a room, then you would add them as a volunteer. What they need to complete, if it's a professional driver that comes from a source like Dean Transportation, a driver for a school system, a regular school bus driver, they don't need to complete anything. Those requirements have already been met by the company or the school. If a driver is volunteering, they're driving rented vans, they must complete all chaperone requirements and be added to the authorized driving list. If the driver will be staying the night in a room, With athletes, they must complete all Class A requirements the same as a chaperone would. Medical volunteers. If you want to volunteer with the medical team, how to become one? At state events, you would go and sign up online for the event. For area, you connect with the area directors. What is needed from a medical volunteer is the volunteer A, your protective behaviors, general orientation, and concussion certificate. First aid and CPR are the minimal certifications required. So they must be certified in first aid and CPR. Medical licenses, certifications are preferred. Medical volunteer spots do fill up very fast for larger events, and preference will always go to those in a medical field. After volunteering as a medical volunteer, they will be added to the medical team contact list and will be notified of any upcoming events. The event registration is found online with the general volunteer sign up. So anyone looking to volunteer at an event would see that as an option as well. They can also email Kelly Murphy to be added to the contact list. So if you know of anybody that is interested in becoming a medical volunteer, point them that direction. They'll be put on that contact list. As far as guests and families, those roles for a guest is anybody that's going to join the area in attendance to the events. They cannot be or are not included in the chaperone ratio numbers. If meals or housing is required, then payment will be due and they are included in the area numbers for the event. Families are allowed to attend events in the stands, but meals and housing will not be provided. Do not include them in your numbers. And they must complete early release forms to take their athlete home after an event. So if the event has concluded and the parents or guardians want to take the athlete with them, if they have, potentially ridden on the bus with the area, then they would need to complete that early release form. Cheerleaders. Cheerleaders essentially act as your team manager. They can also be an athlete traveling with the delegation, but they're not actually participating in the sport. Since we need to know everyone attending an event with the delegation, if they require a meal or housing, then they will need to be included in registration as a cheerleader without an event. As far as registering, when we are registering for games, registering other roles. There is another person role. It is pretty rare to see, but if they don't fit into any other category, then this is what you would register them as. So a good example would be a sign language interpreter for your area. That staff role, in some cases, the area directors or other management team members could be listed as staff. And for area directors that are being entered, AKA what role to enter yourself as, it depends. It's going to be different for every area. It's going to depend on what you are primarily doing at that particular event. For example, Area Director 1 is an AD, but also coaches most sports. So if they're coaching, then that's how we would want you to be entered. Area Director number 2 typically attends the events and oversees everything, but they don't usually coach. So in that case, they could be entered as staff. So many people have multiple roles. So what we ask is that they select the role that best fits the description of what you will be doing at that particular event. For COVID return to play or return to practice requirements, everyone is required to complete the return to play activities waiver. So athletes must have the waiver and an up-to-date current athlete registration or medical form. Unified partners need to have the waiver as well as that up-to-date volunteer A. All coaches, volunteers, and chaperones are required to have the waiver, the return to play webinar, which is hosted by SOMI staff. And if you need or have other people in your area that need that, please let us know so that we can, if there's enough interest, we can try to schedule another one. You need the SOI return to activities training and the SOI online coronavirus outbreak. It's what you need to know training. And those are both done online, as well as your up-to-date, your coach, volunteer, chaperone requirements, which were discussed earlier. So all of your regular requirements, as well as the coronavirus and return to activities and the new waiver. All roles are required to sign in for contact tracing at any events or practices. As far as housing goes, any volunteers, other people, guests, or anyone who is placed in a room with an athlete is required to do all of those, complete all of the Class A requirements. If someone is in a role where they don't complete all Class A requirements and the AD has assigned them to a room with athletes, they would then become a Class A volunteer and would have to do everything. So you want to make sure that if you are going to assign somebody to a room with athletes, that you would have them complete all of those requirements. Here is a list, again, of the 3 regions, the regional people. You can send any forms, any questions to us. Our next session is a month from today on March 9th. The topic is still at this point to be determined. We will put that out in the AD alert probably about 2 weeks from now. And again, thank you to Amerisure for making our training possible tonight.